Hey, this is Anney.
And Samantha.
And welcome to Stuff I'll Never Told You, a production of iHeartRadio.
And I am back in full force, ready to entertain everyone, including you, Anney, because I feel like we have such different perspectives about what we're about to talk about. And I'm just excited that we decided to do this. Yes, we are doing a feminist movie, and this movie is a beloved tale that started off as fan fiction. And I know we've talked about it many a times. Yes, we were talking about the 2008 adaptation of Twilight.
Yes, so it is. We didn't have time to do our usual book club or our usual feminist movie Friday this month. So we're combining the two, kind of. But also, I do have an update on that fan fiction piece that I need to talk about in a minute. Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Well, I know we've talked about it before. I came in late to the game of Twilight. I think I came in before. No. All the books had been released by the time I had come in. But I think the last one, which is Breaking Dawn, because we know all the titles are something to do with like horizons. But like that was still in hardback, and I had to buy it in hardback. But I read Twilight, and then I got engulfed in it. I was like, oh. And it was so easy to read. So I went in, read it 120,000%. My roommate was making fun of me and her boyfriend, as they should, at that time, because it was not for my age. I was out of college at this point, a professional living in Atlanta, and this was geared towards college, high school students, essentially. A young adult novel written by an adult that had a lot of repressed feelings.
Sure.
Stephanie Meyer, who I believe is Mormon and had a lot of pent-up emotion and was kind of like, but I gotta make Harry Potter sexier, but not too sexy.
Right. Which I guess brings me. Okay. First, let me talk about my experience. So, I want to be very, very clear. While I might make some fun while we do this, I totally get why this was so popular. I think that when it came out, I wasn't into romance. And I also was like, but I could just read this fan fiction that I like more. So I never got into it. I did go see the movie in college. And I've told you this story. And I just watched the movie again. And I laughed very hard again at the same part where they're in the class, the bio class, and Bella comes in, and the fan catches her hair, and it blows, and the scent blows towards Edward, I guess. And he's like, oh, and the paper like blows up. And I died laughing in the theater. And these like 14-year-olds behind me, I am not kidding, threatened to take me out to the alley and beat me up.
Like, how do these 14-year-olds don't even know what an alley is? Like, that's so dated.
They were like, we'll go outside right now.
Catch me outside? Did they say this to you?
I don't think that was a thing yet, but essentially that was the vibe. And I didn't mean to make fun. And I'm honestly rewatching it. I'm like, I'm not even sure it wasn't supposed to be kind of funny. Because it was very humorous.
Right. The entire thing, I think, has become a cult classic into that. It is now funnier than it should have been. My cringe scene was a sparkle scene.
Yeah.
And then the, of course, spider monkey scene, which, by the way, I realized there was like themed where they just called each other monkeys for some weird reason. So he says, hang on tight, spider monkey, which is not a part of the book. And everybody was like, what? What just happened? And then there's a scene where they played the baseball, and he climbs up the tree to get the baseball, essentially. And Rosalie says, "That's my monkey, man." I was like, "What what?" So no, we're diving too quickly into this. Of course, if you don't know, I feel like this is because it was, again, I was a little older. So Anney would have been your generation, I think, more so than my generation of people who loved it. But don't get me wrong. we were, again, if you lived a life like mine, which was very churchish, conservative, this book was amazing because you could have the things without having the things. And you understood why these things played out as it did, because this Mormon girl understood sexuality for repressed sexuality for young girls in the church. So this was absolutely that. And many of us, because I got my friends into it too, because they saw the movie, which is hilarious because I thought if they saw the movie, they wouldn't want to read the book. Because the movie, even at that point, was not great to me. But I still loved it, don't get me wrong. But it would catch on. And I have copies of it here, and I cannot find them, so I had to rent it anyway. But before we start, yes, let's talk about the movie. This is written by Stephanie Meyer. Again, fan fiction of Harry Potter, though she doesn't like fan fiction version of her stories, which is interesting in itself. She gives a lot of credit to the music, which my partner was sitting or was around the living room when I was watching this today, and he was like, "Wait, is that Radiohead?" And I was like, "The soundtrack is bomb." Like, for some reason, he's like, "Radiohead never gets permission." And they gave permission for this movie. And I was like, I'm pretty sure they all thought this was like an indie film. And they went with it. Because the director, Catherine Hardwicke, was actually known for a lot of her indie films. It has Evan Rachel Wood as her first movie, as well as Nikki Reed, who we see play Rosalie in Twilight. So it's about these two young girls coming of age and really their angstiness and growing up. And it actually was a really good film. I think it's a great film, and it hit a lot of the rebellion of trying to grow up too quickly and being cool and what that could look like and how scary it could be and how confusing it could be. It also sexualized Evan Rachel Wood at a very early age, and I believe she was 13, 14. She was pretty young at that point. So a lot of things. But Catherine Hardwicke made herself a name in that kind of alternative indie film with that, because it won awards. And I believe Nikki Reed helped write that screenplay at that young age. Yeah, so Nikki Reed also had some cred in this point. So I really think that a lot of the musicians were really honored, kind of thinking this is going to be an indie film. That's, again, this is my theory only, because I'm like, how did she get Linkin Park, who, don't get me wrong, they were kind of kitschy at that point, but still pretty hardcore for a movie like this. Iron and Wine and all these different songs, and you're like, how? And again, Radiohead, they're ridiculously picky about not giving any rights. And there they are in Twilight for teens. Okay. But yeah, this, I'm holding to the fact that, yes, this was intended as an indie look into this movie. This was Catherine Hardwicke's big jump into the mainstream. Summit was not a big studio at that point in time. They were making a name for themselves, but they were more indie-ish at that point in time. So kind of the more commercialized A24, let's say, for today, or Blumhouse. But I guess Blumhouse was more horror, but you get what I'm saying. They were the smaller that grew bigger with some street cred. So here we got this whole idea. And again, Catherine Hardwicke, if you've ever seen her in interviews, she does look punk. She dresses to the leans to the side of punk, which is also why I think the movie's all in the green, real dark mode. Again, very indie feel. And I think this is why you have Kristen Stewart jumping in, who had just come off of her big hit Into the Wild, which is that movie about the dude who gets lost in Alaska, unfortunately eats the wrong things, passes away. But this is how we got introduced to Kristen Stewart. This kind of gave her a name, even though she'd been in many, many movies before. She'd been in movies with Jodie Foster. She was a huge child actor that no one really knew. So, but this really pushed her into the, look at her angsty teen. And this is why she got cast. She was always intended to play Bella, or Isabella Swan, who is our protagonist, who is our Pixie Manic girl. She would be exactly what we talk about, who is clumsy but cute. Everybody wants her. Everybody likes her. Somehow good at everything but bad at everything. All of these things.
This is when I talk about a Mary Sue. This is
the beginning. Maybe she's the beginning.
No, I know what the beginning is.
What's the beginning?
It's a fan fiction. It's famous. But I do want to. I say that as you know, I'm very, I don't think there's anything wrong with a good Mary Sue. I think there's plenty of things to enjoy about a good Mary Sue. So I think it's worth examining the tropes, but also, like, I get it's fun.
Yes.
It can be really
fun. And Bella
fun.
is that girl. She is that girl.
Mm-hmm.
So we have Kristen Stewart being this and always being this. Later we find Robert Pattinson, who hates this role. I think he started to come back and embrace it, but hates this role now. And the only reason he did it was because of Kristen Stewart. If you listen to his interviews, he always talked about how he was about to quit until he got this role, but their chemistry was too good. And we saw that in real life, and then it just bombed. And then we're like, yeah, Kristen Stewart's gay, obviously. And then we, again, meet Nikki Reed, who has always been a good friend with Catherine Hardwicke, has always been a part of this as well, with the awful dye job that apparently ruined her hair. And they had to do wigs after that, but it up her hair real good. That if you know the behind the scenes. Again, we have Billy Burke, who plays the father of Kristen Stewart, who I think is the only good actor in this entire thing, to be honest. Sorry, y'all. And then we have Peter Facinelli, who plays Carlisle Cullen. Elizabeth Reeser, Esme Cullen, Ashley Greene, we were introduced to her, Cullen Lutz, and Jackson Rathbone. And then there's several other actors that we include. Of course, we also have to talk about Taylor Lautner, who's only in a few scenes, so he's just barely introduced, who is from Native lineage. So I remember that was really important, and I'm glad that they stuck to it. And they stuck to it throughout the entire movies to bring in Native actors into this entire conversation. They did switch out the Native actors because the initial ones were not buff enough to be half naked, so they had to switch them all out. And then we are introduced to Anna Kendrick, who, yes, she is one of the, isn't she Oscar nominated at this point? She's got awards. Still real bad. Still real bad in this.
I forgot she was in there.
She's in here. But she's probably one of the better ones. Justin Chon, which y'all may not know who he is, but I know who he is because he's a Korean actor that I was like, what? Was very glad to see as part of the cast. And he is a big writer and does a lot of great movies, especially about Korean culture in the U.S. Just, to put that in there. But yeah, so we have a lot of interesting things, new people coming into play. Yes. And if you're wondering, the book, they try to closely stay with the book. So the writer, the screenplay writer, Melissa Rosenberg, which we have talked about her before, she talks about how she wanted to, be as close to the book as possible, taking some of the lines. And I think this is where we see how when it's translated to real life, it doesn't go well. It's better when you don't say it out loud in your head because you can imagine and you can kind of just graze over it. But then when they actually say the lines out loud, you're like, oh, that's bad. Again, the idea of a sparkly man seems interesting until you see it on screen and you're like, this did not turn out well. And again, I say that this is a person that was a fan and that still has these books. I shamefully hide them because I'm like, oh God. But I did love them. So, and if I remember correctly, I believe our producer, super producer Christina, also loved them, who is younger than the both of us. And yeah, I think it's making a replay. Like it's coming back. Kids are coming back and discovering it and loving it. So if you're a fan, you do you. Enjoy every bit of it. Don't listen to me cringing at it. I enjoyed it for what it was. It entertained me for many a times. Love me some Robert Pattinson. Oh, yeah. Annie, are you Team Jacob or Team Edward?
Oh.
That's an important question.
Well, okay. So I am making notes of what we need to talk about at the end for themes. One of the ones is we did talk about this in shipping, our shipping episode. This was a big moment in shipping. I did not read the books. I saw the first movie. So I feel that I was just like,
so I should have made you watch all of the movies.
No.
Oh, it's what you're saying. Oh, it's coming back now. Now that I've discovered this.
I do have a note about the later movies, though, because the baby is infamous.
The baby. Okay, well, the name alone was a tragedy, and I feel bad for any author because we've talked about having names as writers, and it's difficult.
Yeah.
Honestly. But the name she picked out was so bad that we were all like, I don't think anyone, no fan, was on her side for this.
Well, I don't know what it is.
Renesmee.
Renesmee.
Her name, because Bella wanted to combine the name of her two parents, the two mothers.
Oh, okay.
And so Renesmee was the name. Instead of giving her like a middle name and a first name of sorts. And then, spoiler alert, this is over like, 20 years old almost. They call her Essie.
Okay.
And she gets very angry about this because Essie is the name of the Loch Ness Monster.
Oh, okay.
There you go. Anyway, all right. So let's just go ahead and go into the plot real quick. We have Edward Cullen, played by Robert Pattinson, who is the main lead. Now I'm thinking Korean level, so sorry if I put it this way, but this is the classic triangle trope. So we have the main lead, who would be Robert Pattinson, the second lead, who would be Taylor Lautner's character, Jacob, who is a Native American that lives on the reservation, quote unquote, and they are mortal enemies of the Cullens. So we get introduced to Bella, who is leaving Arizona and goes to live with her father because her mother and her stepfather are now traveling since her stepfather is a baseball player. And this does closely go to the book. And she goes to Forks, Oregon, which exists and you can visit, and they love their tourists. So you can go and hang out with them if you want. By the way, I was trying to search a way to watch this without paying for it. And instead of finding the actual movies, I found like side movies, I guess, or documentaries. And one of them was a whole fan quest. It's what it called. It was Twilight ... fan quest. And you just went with people to go do the tour with them. Like, this is how big, like, there's so much love for this movie. And I think it still exists, to be honest. So we have her going to Oregon. She hates the rain. She hates the cold, but, Oregon is rainy and cold. Oh, no. She comes in, doesn't have much of a relationship with her father. He is very awkward. She is very shy and awkward. So this is a whole buildup. He's the sheriff of the town, of course. She goes to the school. She meets this bunch of kids who all the boys are fighting over her now. But then her eyes are caught by the Cullens, who is this mysterious family that got adopted by Dr. Cullen, as we talked about, Carlisle, and Esme, his wife. And they are all very pale and beautiful, but they're all with each other except for Edward. Edward does not have a partner. We have a kooky one who is Alice, and very they call her I guess not the flighty one, but essentially like a fairy. The way they describe her, she's like a pixie fairy, like, oh, happy, with a pixie cut even. Yes. We have Jasper, who is the brooding one. That's her partner, and he just looks angry all the time, he just looks constipated. The descriptions is amazing because they actually say the descriptions out loud of them. And and the way that, don't get me wrong, I'm so sorry, actors. I know they're phenomenal and it's a hard job, but still. Laughter. Okay. And then again, we have Rosalie and her love, Emmett. They're just a beautiful couple in general. And then we find Edward, who just smirks all the time, and according to Anna Kendrick's character, is too good for everyone. And he just smirks. Ha ha ha. That's the end. They are in their corner, and of course Bella is quickly smitten by Edward, and he is completely confused. We get an introduction to him when she walks into the classroom and stands in front of a fan, and he looks like he's going to throw up. As she goes and sits next to him, and then he runs away, and we find out he's trying to exchange classes, and she's so upset. And again, I know Kristen Stewart's a great actress. I've seen her on some amazing things. She's been nominated for many awards. It's so bad. The overhyped lip biting when she gets her feelings hurt, I was like, wow. And then when she gets frustrated or excited, Yeah. This is what makes me go, I don't understand. What is that? Anyway, and we're moving on. Later, we go back to her coming to the school. Oh no, this dude's car goes out of, it gets slips on the ice, is coming at her. All of a sudden, Edward appears and pushes the car away from her so she doesn't get crushed. And she's like, what the hell? He was across from the parking lot. How did he get over here so quick? So many mysteries unfold. And soon she discovers that he is a vampire. She goes down the route of Googling things about vampires. I don't think it ever says vampire until she starts Googling. Like, you never really see that. And then she confronts him in the woods where she's supposed to be really clumsy and tripping everywhere. And he's like throwing trees.
Yep.
And jumping from place to place. And then he's trying to get angry. And then he shows her his skin color. And his skin is sparkly. And turns out vampires sparkle in the sun, and that's why they love Forks, because it's always cloudy and they don't have to hide as much unless they go quote unquote camping, because if it's sunny they can't be at school, so that's when the whole family goes camping, is what they say. During all this time, we find out that Rosalie is very unhappy because if he ruins everything and kills her, they'll have to run away and hide again until the next generation of people come back, because they come back every few years, or every several decades or centuries, to replay, pretend like they're still young kids, because they never age, obviously. But he tells her the whole story about being saved. In 1918, Carlisle saves him, and then Esme and everybody else, and they become one big happy family. She goes to visit the family. There's a whole joke about the hats.
Yeah.
And in the book, it's something else. There is a joke, but it's not the hats, and I can't remember what it is. It's not graduation hats. I want to say it might be diplomas that they have. If any of you listeners remember, tell me, because I just remember that one distinct detail. That's not what it was. But they try to keep it. We also know that Robert Pattinson in real life is very musically inclined, so he actually wrote a piano piece to play Bella, and it's like a theme throughout. I think it's called Bella's Theme or something like that. And then they're all very cute. The family's excited to meet her, except for Rosalie, and except for Jasper, because it turns out Jasper hasn't been a vampire for as long as everybody else and still wants to eat her because she smells so delicious. And that's the whole thing about him looking like he's going to vomit, is she smells so good compared to nothing he's ever smelled, that he's tempted to kill her all the time, to eat her all the time. And then in the book, they actually have a conversation with Emmett and Edward about, he's like, just give in, it's okay. I did it once, and yeah, I felt bad, but it's hard, man, so go for it. Essentially trying to get him to kill Bella. And telling his own stories about how he did that. And I was like, what the... Okay. But yes, so he is always tempted to eat her because she smells amazing. And so everybody's just waiting for that to happen. Half of them are trying to tell him to turn her so he can be with her forever. And half of them are like, no, we got to just leave her alone. She's going to ruin our lives. And in all of these vampires have special abilities, whether it's strength or making people calm. And for Edward, it's reading minds, except he can't read her mind. Oh no, of course, because she's that one different girl. And for Alice, she can read the future oftentimes, and she knows that eventually Bella is going to be a part of the family. So she's very happy, excited for her to be a part of the family. So delightful. Moving on, they decide to be together. We have a whole baseball game happening with the loud thunder. Again, one of the funniest scenes I think I've ever seen in my life. As well as the fact that we get introduced to the villains of the crew, the three vampires who've been coming in, eating people left and right and making people missing. And then there's one dude that's a tracker, quote unquote. So he loves hunting for fun, and the harder the prey, the better for him. And because he catches Bella's scent, he's like, oh, and then because all of the vampires are trying to protect her, he's like, this is the ultimate game. So Bella is now in danger, which is what Edward was afraid of, and Edward doesn't want to change her humanity, and he doesn't want to take away from her because he thinks he's a monster, all these things. And he's old-fashioned, so he's got to protect her because, of course, he's got to protect her. She's a weak human woman. Then we go on this whole goose chase about her trying to run away. They go back to Phoenix, which is where she's originally from. She gets tricked into thinking, oh no, my mother's in danger. Oldest trick in the book. Goes and tries to rescue her at a ballet center. And at this ballet center, we have the ultimate showdown between this tracker and everybody. She almost dies. She doesn't. Edward almost eats her. He doesn't. He ends up saving the day. They have this really hilarious ripping of the villain scene. They rip him apart and burn him. And I noticed in this scene, you see Alice just dancing at the bonfire for no reason. I'm like, what's happening?
Hey.
You do you, Alice. You do you. And then she goes to the hospital where she wakes up and they've made up the story about how clumsy she was and she fell out the window. Normal. Completely normal. And everybody's so excited that she's awake and she decides she just wants to stay at Forks. She doesn't want to go with her mother to Jacksonville. And then cut to prom. When she didn't want to go because she's so clumsy and she's so like hates public and dancing and all that stuff. But anyway, he takes her in a foot cast, very cute, sees everybody else is paired off, the school friends have all paired off, and everybody's very happy. The final dance scene is where they go to a gazebo where these two couples are dancing to no music because he's not played the new song yet. But they're dancing happily next to Bella and Edward to Iron and Wine, Flightless Bird, the worst. I can't imagine it being at what prom? At what prom? But anyway, so that's what we see them, and she's trying to convince him that she wants to return and be with him forever at the age of 17. That's all I know. We know Alice has seen it. Do it. And then that's how it kind of ends. And oh yeah, in between all this, Jacob does pop up and does tell a little bit of a story saying, oh, there's a thing between us and the Cullens. They're not allowed on the reservation. And then he doesn't know what's going on, but doesn't believe in any of the legends. He comes to the prom to warn Bella and say, break up with him. Cool. And yeah, and that's the backstory. And then cut to Radiohead song.
And then what? 2 more books? And
3 more. It's
3 more movies. I know.
No, there's 5 movies. So it is Twilight, New Moon, Eclipse, and Breaking Dawn's Part 1 and 2. So they split the last one, much like every other anything finale. So they broke it up into 2 pieces. Stephanie Myers does make some cameos. She's actually in the diner scene. Who is the writer? She's in the diner scene where we see Charlie and Bella eating and the waitress being like, it's been so long, you're so beautiful, you're so grown up. That whole scene, Stephanie Myers is at the counter eating. Stephanie Myers was very hands-on for this, as well as like the soundtrack. It's her soundtrack. So what she said was that all the songs, most of the songs that you hear are from artists that she was listening to the entire time she was writing these books. And BT Dubs, I've talked about this before, she did write, and I think she released a few years ago the perspective from Edward. And I had gotten my hands on that copy a long time ago. I'm sure I have it around here somewhere. And I actually really like that perspective better. And by the way, I think I forgot to add, he likes to stalk her and would just stand in the bedroom and watch her.
Oh yeah, that's a theme I have to talk about.
Yeah,
yes.
So we have all that. So there's a lot of themes. But I think one thing I do, even though I'm joking and laughing throughout because to me it's so cringe today, and that because I know the caliber of actors that are in there, that's just like, wow. That most of those actors really hate it. I think looking back at this film. But it is very entertaining. It was a huge hit. It is a huge hit. They definitely got a lot of prestige and awards. A lot of actors really got a lot of opportunities because of this movie. So no, real talk. If you love this, if you like this, if you're discovering this, again, there's no shame. There's millions of people that are with you and love this book, loved everything about these characters. I think a few of the characters were disappointing, but like people love Robert Pattinson being Edward. People loved Taylor Lautner being Jacob. Like it is a cult favorite. Bella will always be Kristen Stewart, like all these things. So there's no shame. Like the love for this, the fandom for this specific genre and specific book is legit. So even though like I'm making jokes, I was a fan. Like I have to admit, like I think it's kind of outgrown now, and now it's coming back for some of the younger generations once again. But it is. So we're not trying to like make it seem like it's not legitimate. We're not trying to say any of that because I think it's interesting to the level of like love this can have and the way that it grew, that no one knew that it would grow to this level.
Yeah. And I think that it speaks to how often, which is a point I like to make all the time, we feel very comfortable making fun of what women and girls like. Like, oh, this is really silly and it's not worth it. But it does speak to a bunch of people. It is hugely, hugely popular. And I think it doesn't have to be the best thing ever to be enjoyable and to be fun. Like, I don't think that means we do that all the time for movies that are led by men. I think like if it doesn't have to be that, it can be fun and something you just like, and it doesn't have to be the best thing.
Right. And I honestly, like for that time, I was nannying, very like, I didn't do anything. I just nannied and hung out with people sometimes. I didn't have a relationship. I wasn't dating people. I was still trying to discover myself, honestly. And this type of entertainment was exciting. It was something exciting and waiting for the next one and trying to get to the next one. And in the fandom, and I know you understand this, waiting and guessing about who it could be. So before, I did get to the books before it got to be movies. I had whole pictures of who was who, and who was going to be what and how it's going to be done. I think I even read out loud Bella's parts to see if I could pull off the lines. I could not.
Yes! I love it.
I could not. I wanted to be the protagonist as well, the leading lady, but I did not. Mm-hmm. Am I that clumsy? Yes. Do people find that endearing? No. Let's be very honest. Am I cutesy and sweet and awkward? No. I'm awkward.
Right.
All of those things. But yeah, I think like that's definitely something we need to talk about. But like, yeah, one of the themes to this, of course, is that the fantasy of it all, whether it's vampires, and again, we haven't introduced werewolves to this. She makes sure to bounce it out. The stories behind each of the vampires are different, and they don't get released till later either. So Jasper ends up being a Confederate soldier, which is kind of like, oh, okay. But, you know, that's how we get introduced to him. That's his backstory. Emmett ends up being, I think he was a hunter who got killed by a bear. If I remember correctly. Rosalie, her, I was like, why did y'all have to do this to her? Like, she ended up being murdered and raped by her fiance. Like, it was pretty horrific. I was like, what? And she comes back with a vengeance and kills all of them. But, like, it's like, damn. And I don't know Alice's story. Alice, you don't actually know her backstory. You just know she discovers and finds Jasper. So I don't know much of Alice's story. She's just very, like, different. And then we find Carlisle's story was he is a part of a big coven that's very powerful in the vampire world, but he wanted peace, so he left that. And Esme was dying, I think, from childbirth. I can't quite remember, and he discovered her. So he's always been a doctor because he's tried to give back for taking away from humanity by healing humanity. That's his whole thing. So you have all these stories, and then later we find all these other vampires coming through, and there's some famous people in this list of vampires. Rami Malek, who got his big, like, he started in the show called Mr. Robot, which was like a huge show for a while, and then he was in the Queen movie. Like, he's won Oscars now. Like, he was in there for a second. And then we have Michael Sheen, who everybody loves, in there for a second. Like, you have some big names that came out of nowhere. Like, what is happening? How did these people get to be like it just got bigger and bigger and bigger. Bryce Dallas Howard is in it, and originally she said no, so she was a recast because she was such a bigger name that they wanted her originally. She said she turned it down, realized how big it was, came back to it. So we have her coming back into it as well. We have, I believe it's Dakota Fanning as well, who plays one of the characters. So like you have some bigger names that come onto this. They're like, yes, is this going to be the new Harry Potter? And for its franchise, it was huge. But again, I think because people were sexist, I'm like, this is only for women. That's why it didn't get the same acclaim as Harry Potter necessarily. Is it as good writing? I would differ and say no, because it's not necessarily as inventive. But again, all these things, it got all the different awards from like the very like MTV awards and all these things. So in this level of fantasy, it really did bring in a lot of new people, a lot of interest, and a lot of more love for vampires again. You know, that's kind of cyclical. Sometimes it's witches, sometimes it's werewolves, and this brought back vampires.
Yes, and I remember it brought about a bunch of like, why are women attracted to vampires now? What's going on?
I think it's just like, we talked about this before about horror, like you have a lot of people have one specific thing that they love the most. And for me, it was vampires too. I'm like, I don't know why. I don't know if it was like an Interview with a Vampire or Lost Boys. I watched that as a kid and loved. That's probably one of my favorite horror movies, and probably one of the, I think, one of the best made vampire movies ever to date. But I've always loved vampires.
Yeah, it's interesting because, well, like I remembered when this came out, and like when you get kind of the parodies that came out later, like What We Do in the Shadows, and they were making fun of like the glitter and the glitter, the shiny skin, the creepy paper. But one of my biggest things about vampires has always been the age difference.
Oh yeah,
I don't care if you're 17 when you're bitten; you're 100 years older than her.
That's so. But it gets weirder later on when we have the whole imprinting thing that they place on the werewolves, and then like several of them have imprinted on toddlers and newborns, and they're all like supposed to be in their late teens or early 20s, and you're like, what? And like there's there's this level of like, I feel like this could be an underlying pedophilic ideal. Like I don't know what you're doing, or if that's purposeful, because all of these people are being matched at such a young age, and then like eventually, like when the minute they turn legal, we're married, and you're like, what the hell?
Yeah, and it's sort of those weird, like when you like stretch it out over hundreds of years. Like, sure, if you're 200 and he's 400, what do I know? But like when you're getting bitten, if you're 17,
what do I know?
That's an age difference I can't comprehend.
And again, not to be too realistic, but like I didn't know who I was at 17. I think I started liking myself at late 30s. So what? Would you want this as a choice? There's so much to this. But yes, the themes are there. Obviously, we have the theme of eternity. We have the themes for love. We have the theme for hating yourself, self-hate. And then also, again, like this whole protection is there. Like so many interesting themes, so many interesting tropes. Again, we don't have the triangle yet. That comes in New Moon when we find out the backstory of the reservation of the native peoples, of the first peoples. And then, but we have the protective father who is over the top. Like the character for him, of course, the person who played this character, again, I'm like, probably one of the best actors in this entire thing, Billy Burke. He does a phenomenal job in making it funny. Like he is kind of the foil without being a foil. Here. And the mom's supposed to be much like her, flighty, forgetful, and clumsy. Which is, I guess, a thing.
Right. But for sure, there is the stalking that came up in our
Yes.
stalking episode. This is a big, like, watching her sleep. There's also kind of and I haven't read this, so you can correct me. But from what I understand, there's like a suicidality that comes in.
Yes.
Or she's like, if I can't be with him, then this is.
So that comes in later. But it's not necessarily because she wants to die. It's because those moments of excitement, he comes to her as like a consciousness. And so she wants that so badly, she's willing to risk her life because she's so sad. Like this is in book 2 because he leaves her.
Right.
But he wants to die because he hates himself for being a monster.
Which brings me to my next point. Yes, there's this whole idea of like, he keeps saying things like, you make me want you so bad, I can't resist you. Like, I'm a monster, which I feel is very much our kind of like, kind of rape culture and like, I can't resist you. You're the one making me do this.
It's true. I will give you one thing though. He resists. He is able to resist. So if he can do it,
yeah,
why can't men?
Right. And like I said, I've read this. Like this is so big in fan. All of this is so big in fan fiction. So I'm not judging. I just think it's good to be like,
yeah. Well, when you look at the reality of it, for sure, you're like, this is not cute. Like none of this is cute. Like again, the stalking, the protecting, the almost dying all the time, the sneaking in the bedroom without permission. Like there's so much. There's so much. And then the lying to the parents and then running away. And then like, you're like, wait, again, she's only 17?
Yeah.
You forget how old they are because you're reading from her perspective. And so therefore you place your own age into that. And I think when I was reading it, I was 26, maybe. I'm trying to remember. There's so much of this. And yes, and then we get into the, like, when we go back to the rest of the book and the back and forth where she doesn't get to choose. It's a fight between the dudes and she doesn't get a say hardly at all. Yeah. The way of jealousy, so much physical touch, all these things.
So I wanted to bring back the final point about the baby. I haven't seen this, obviously, but I do know about this because I love watching YouTube videos about like the top 10 scariest things. This regularly comes up on the top 10 scariest movie props, was the baby in that movie. And there are like quotes from the actors like, I couldn't look it in the eye.
And that poor girl who is supposed to be like imaged of, who is a super beautiful girl, which is why they picked her. Like she's supposed to be super pretty, all these things. They use her image for this doll. And it's so bad because what they do is pretty much overlay her actual face onto a bad doll prop.
Oh no.
And it's not good. It's not good. Oh, it's so not good. I'm like, you really get excited for when she turns the age that she's supposed to be. Because it's so creepy and they're all like so enamored by her. And I'm like, don't touch that baby. And by the way, she's literally eating her inside. Like in the way it describes it is there's a scene where Bella, who is still human at this point, gets impregnated by Edward after they're married, of course, y'all. They get married. She's on her honeymoon at 18, right after they graduate. She gets pregnant, which is supposed to be impossible because she is a succubus at this point, but whatever. And because also he's dead and has no bodily fluids, but yet she gets pregnant.
It would be like freezing. They said his hands were so cold.
Doesn't make sense. Okay. Anyway, they create this baby, and in this, she's getting. You can tell she's getting worn and like she's getting haggard, and it is eating away her interior. There's a point where she gets some blood because that's the only thing that's actually really satisfying her and making her feel kind of healthy. So they give her like bagged blood. She has it in a cup. She drops the cup. The baby lunges inside of the stomach for this blood and like breaks every bone in her body and is like almost coming out of the uterine sac. Like the way it describes it, and then it's almost eating at the uterine sac is what it's saying. And she does die, essentially. And that's why she gets turned, because at the point of death is when Edward tries to, like, bring her back to life, because there's no way. So the whole thing back and forth is everybody hates this baby except for Bella and Rosalie, who's wanted a baby her entire life. But because she died before she could, all she wanted to be was a mother. This is a big trope, too. But died before she could, so she feels bitter towards Bella now because she's giving up her humanity and ability to have children, which is again what. But in this, they are the only two who are willing to allow this baby to thrive while everybody else is trying to say abort it. Which I'm like, if it's that strong, can you? And by the way, this is a very like pro-life stance on this movie.
Oh. Okay.
On this show.
Yeah.
Like you might, which again, she's Mormon. So I think like it makes sense. It never says it. But and then she never really, if I remember correctly, again, I read it during a time where I was still very conservative, so maybe. She never really says anything about abortion as being bad. But like it definitely looks at but other people want this baby. That whole adoption thing type of thing. And so it's kind of like, and for the sake of, in the sake of like, yes, sacrifice the mother. So it's interesting. Like we could talk about that level like too, but that's that big trope of like trying to be a mother and like what are you willing to risk to be a mother? You know, it wasn't important to Bella until she had the baby. She could feel it. She could feel it at like week 1. By the way, week 1 because the baby like grows so quickly because she is a vampire. Half vampire.
Oh.
She's half vampire.
Oh my gosh. Okay. I guess that's sure how it works.
Either way. But yes, there are so many things. So entertaining. I do want to now make you watch all 4 or 5 of the movies.
Oh dear. I mean, we could. I do want to come. I've been meaning to talk about this specific trope of the relationship in this. Between, because I feel like that is everywhere. Like I was even thinking of True Blood when I was watching this, because you sort of have like your old vampire, then you're like kind of innocent.
Yes, she's a virgin. Person. All of them are virgins,
right? So I kind of want to come back and talk about that. But I wanted to. I have my fan fiction update, so I wanted to go back and find the fan fiction that this is based on. But it turns out there's a conspiracy theory. So the author says it came to her in a dream.
Yes, I've heard that.
And a lot of people were like, but I've read this fan fiction. And so there was this big theory, like, because if you're like me, you download the fan fiction, then you have it. And so a lot of times when people publish books based off their fan fiction, they delete it. But she's always said, like, it came to me in a dream, and people have always been like, but it's this fan fiction. And not only that, there was a theory that it was a My Chemical Romance fan fiction. But she said, like, that influenced it, but was not what it was. And then there was a theory that it was a Buffy the Vampire fan fiction, which it definitely wasn't. But then there was a really funny theory that Harry Potter was a Twilight fan fiction, which is impossible. Yeah. But no. So I went on this whole thing. I guess I think a lot of people do confuse Immortal Bones. That is definitely a Harry Potter fan fiction. I feel that I have read this fan fiction, but also fan fiction can be very tropey, so it's possible that it was just a fan fiction that was very similar. She has not said.
Right.
But also, this led me to a whole other thing where I found books that you don't know are based on fan fiction. And a lot of them are Star Wars, I was surprised, but a lot of them are Twilight. So not just 50 Shades of Grey, but there's a bunch of Twilight fan fiction books. Of this list of 10, I think it's 4. So
anyone that we would
obviously
know? Outside of 50 Shades?
Probably some people would. I think they're outside of, I don't really read a lot of romance. Gabriel's Inferno, Simpre.
Which I love Supernatural rips on Twilight.
They do. Twihard. Live free or Twihard.
Between the Gavin Rosdell episode and then that one, like, it's the literal, like, bringing in young girls episode.
Yeah.
Where Jensen turns into a vampire. Or
Yes,
Dean,
Live free or Twihard.
That's that one.
Yep.
There's two.
Uh-huh. Yeah. So I mean, it is interesting.
Oh, no, wait. Gavin Rosdell one was a Criminal Minds episode. I'm so sorry. Wow.
How dare you?
That was a moment.
But yeah, I just think that's, I can't prove either way.
Yeah.
But I do think it's going back to what you said and what I say all the time. I think that the fact that shouldn't be looked down upon either way. Fan fiction is great. And this is, even though it was more coded towards women, it shouldn't be like, that's useless,
right.
or that's not something we should talk about. It clearly resonated. It spawned all of this other work.
Right. As well as the fact that she made money. So, joke's on us.
Yes. I went home this weekend and my mom was like, she heard some piece on NPR and was like, you can make money off your fan fiction. I was like, yeah. And she's like, are you going to try to make money off your fan fiction? And I laughed out loud for so long. I was like, no.
That's cute. Your mom's trying to help you.
No.
Just to make some money.
But thank you. For the assumption that I could.
That's amazing.
But yeah, this was fun. I'm sure you'll probably rope me into watching more.
Now I'm determined.
Oh,
we're gonna watch all of them.
See this baby in
you have to see the baby.
Life.
You have to see the romance scenes.
Oh, I'm getting anxious. Just
I will say they had the best twist of like one of the fight scenes that I think I've seen on TikTok recently. People were like, "Oh wow, okay, wow, that was actually genius."
Okay, well. We'll be back.
Yeah.
Yes. But in the meantime, we would love to hear about your thoughts on this, listeners.
I know people have thoughts.
Yes. You can email us at stephanieandmomstuff@iheartmedia.com. You can find us on Twitter at momstuffpodcast or on Instagram and TikTok at Stuff Mom Never Told You. We have a TeePublic store. You can find it. We also have a book that you can get at stuffyoushouldreadbooks.com. Thanks, as always, to our super producer, Christina, our executive producer, Maya, and our contributor, Joey.
Thank you.
And thanks to you for listening. Stuff I Never Told You is a production of iHeartRadio. For more podcasts from iHeartRadio, you can check out the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen to your favorite shows.